Welcome to today's edition of Mental Health Matters. Today, I have my nephew Cortez Alexander on the show, and we're going to talk about our upbringing, our education, and our career. Get you some to drink and get you a snack and come on back. Good morning, nephew. How are you doing today on this great Saturday morning?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. It's a bit cold over here where I'm at, but all in all, I'm all right.
You look a little tired. Did you stay up late last night?
Just a little bit, just a little bit. But
Oh, okay.
I'm a-okay.
Oh, okay. All right. So why don't we start off with you introducing yourself and just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. So my name's Cortez Alexander. I always have trouble with the introductions, but basically I'm a person from Chicago. I thoroughly enjoy traveling, and I my work now is that I work in admissions for an international exchange program. So all in all, it's that's me in a nutshell. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. So were you born and raised in the city of Chicago?
Yeah, so I was born on the west side of Chicago, and that's where I grew up. And home currently is Baltimore, and I work in DC. So it's a bit of being a bit of all being all over the place, but home is definitely where I grew up is always Chicago.
Nice, nice. What was it like for you growing up in Chicago? Like, what was it like for you?
So for me, growing up in Chicago, it was a bit different, difficult at times, inspiring at other times. Um, it's I would say growing up on the West Side, it could be difficult because there's a lot of resources that we don't have and a lot of access that we don't have. But there is always a promise, as I say, in these different regions of Chicago. But it was a difficult time. But now when I go back, it's nowhere near as tough as it was.
Nice. I think it's interesting that you talked about a lack of resources being available to our community in Chicago. When I was growing up there, I wasn't even aware that some other places, some other states, some other communities had resources for various reasons, you know. And so when you mentioned that, I think that that was really good to highlight. Obviously, now being older and out of Chicago and having a little bit more life experience, I'm able to identify the lack that I had being a native of Chicago back then. So let me ask you another question. What do you feel like? Um, what Let me back. What type of environment do you feel would have been beneficial for you growing up, or do you feel like the environment I grew up in, it was all right, you know, it just kind of helped me to become the man I am today? Or do you feel like, you know, you would have benefit from growing up in a different environment?
Well, that's always a very interesting question. I think for me, the environment I grew up in was a bit difficult. It was a
Yeah.
lot of drugs and a lot of gang activity. Um, and so I don't. For some people, they're able to overcome those sorts of adversities, whereas other people may not be. Um,
Hmm.
but when we talk about communities being under resourced, which mine most definitely was, I think we have to talk about just knowledge and not knowing, because what the thing to me is that I don't fault people for not knowing. It's simply
Hmm.
the fact that like there is no other option. And so
Yeah.
as you grow and as you learn of other options and other ways of living in other communities, you see your community in a very different light. Um, and I'd say, for example, I met a friend from college, and he went to one of the more wealthier suburbs. He grew up in the wealthier suburbs of Chicago, and so we had really good friends. And so we were talking about our communities, and he showed me his school, which was a
Mhm.
public school, and I was like, well. what I thought was really fascinating is I'm like, well, how does your public school look like this? And mine looks very different. And
Yeah.
he explained to me about, property taxes and property taxes going to support the school. And then I looked at my community. I'm like, I wonder where our property taxes are going for those who do own homes in the community. Um, but it was really interesting. I think about the environment, and I think about uh, ways in which it could be improved. And I would definitely say just access to more information would be a really big one, because we just may not know how to navigate certain aspects of society. So I think that's an important one for me.
That's absolutely correct. I think for me, I think I put a lot of emphasis on education and getting up out the hood and things like that. Also, I put a lot of emphasis on my upbringing and my parents, which I carried a lot of disdain and carried a lot of hurt and a lot of dysfunctionality within the inside of me, and it affected other relationships. I mean, and friends, and when I got girls, and my fraternity brothers and things like that. But as I got older, I realized that they didn't know, because they themselves was a product of their environment. And so I'm very fortunate to have been able to, just get out of Chicago, but still not forget where I came from, and realize that what I went through in life was just only fuel for my fire, so to speak. You mentioned earlier that, like, a lot of people, they're not able to make that transition for whatever the reason may be. But I think it's important, in my opinion, that we, for those of us that made it out, per se, that we give back to the culture, whether it's in Chicago, whether it's here, when it comes to the African American community. So let's talk a little bit about, I know a lot of the answers to the question, but I'm trying to go somewhere with this where people can really explore your upbringing, but see where you are now. So that's why I'm actually saying probing questions. So did you come from a two-family home? How was you raised? And, what was that like?
So the my family home was it's a bit different than most people.
Yeah,
My I grew up with my parents, but not necessarily always involved in my life. My
yeah,
mother, she was a bit out of my life, and my father, he was in for some parts, other parts not. But I grew up with my grandma, and
yeah.
she raised me. So she
Yeah,
raised me, and until I became a teenager, and then I transitioned to living with my parents. So
nice.
yeah, it was a very different environment. I would say my grandma did the absolute best that she could, raising uh, four teenage boys all
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah.
So it was a fun time. It's a fun time.
So did you ever feel neglected by your parents because your grandmother was raising you, or did you
Mhm.
feel like you was fortunate that you had somebody from your family who was willing to kind of put in the work and the time and be a support system for you?
Well, so being raised with my grandma was all that I knew. So, it was great to always have, a source of support,
Hmm.
and always have, just somebody who I could lean on and talk to. That's something I always loved about my grandma.
Yeah.
I think if I ever felt neglect, I would say so. I would say in some aspects, yes, because
Okay.
there would be assemblies that I didn't have any parents to come to, or
Yeah.
certain like school events that I wouldn't have any parental participation.
Yeah.
Um, and in other ways, there were moments where I felt, extreme support.
Yeah.
Where I remember my mom, in the midst of her trials and tribulations, she found a way to give me a gift, which I still watch to this day. It was a VHS copy of The Prince of Egypt, and
Yeah,
it had a little beanbag camel on it. It came with the VHS,
yeah.
and I loved it. I watched the movie, and I loved it since then. And that's a fond memory that I keep to this day, because although it was in a period where I felt neglect, there were small moments when I did feel support.
Yeah. And I asked you for that because I was trying to compare um, the way you felt about your parents not being that during that time period, because that's exactly how I felt. We do come from a family of where there is substance abuse and alcohol abuse and things like that. And that played a role in both of our lives being affected by lack of parenting during that time period. Thank God it's not like that now, but that played a role. But you know, for whatever reason, God granted us the grace to be able to overcome a lot of the obstacles that was, in the forefront of our lives and stuff like that. Do you feel like and I'm gonna tell you why I'm asking this, but do you feel like you experience any mental health challenges like depression, anxiety from, a lack of parenting during that time when you were staying with your grandmother?
Mm. Well, now that I'm older and I know what these signs represent when it comes to just mental health and mental health issues, I would say when I was younger, definitely had a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
because and a lot of that comes from when my mom used to take me to school. It would be a very anxious time for me, because
Mm-hmm.
I would be so concerned about not seeing her again, because there would be days in which I wouldn't see her. And so that's kind of like, as I think about it and I thought about my childhood, I'm like, oh, that's what anxiety looked like for
Yeah.
me. Or
Yeah.
or what does these outbursts, which I'm known for as a kid, that I had as a kid,
Yes.
how have they manifested themselves and in other kids that I see? That the anger of just growing up in in a very tumultuous and in some ways unsecure environment.
Yeah.
How does that manifest itself when it comes to behavior? And mental health always connects to that, because as you feel neglect, lots of kids, which as at least for myself when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I had very so many anger issues, and a large part of that was due to both anxiety and my mental health not being as stable as I would say it could have been, but that came from the lack of stability, in which I didn't have my parents around at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember that. I remember the outbursts. I remember, my sister coming up to school for you, and you know how it be with Black mamas.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I actually didn't really think about it that way until you mentioned that. You did have a lot of outbursts, and there was a lot of concern, a lot of conversations. Behind closed doors. You like, talk to your mother, she'd be like, I don't know what's going on, but I had to go up to school for him. And I told him, and you know how things go. But for me, I experienced a lot of anxiety and depression and a lot of suicidal thoughts, because I used to think I was adopted because I didn't understand why nobody wanted to get out of this environment. It didn't make sense to me. So I found myself latching on to other friends who had like stable homes or come from two-parent homes, or families that wasn't drinking or doing drugs. That for some reason during that time, that was always a comfort for me. And it was rough. It was rough. I think I was too scared to go through with the suicide because I thought, other things like hell and religion, but it was a lot of suicidal thoughts. I spent a lot of time alone, a lot of alone time just by myself, because I was hurting. And I didn't have the support. I didn't have the people that I felt will understand. Nobody talked about school or education or getting out. It was always like a cycle, you know, folks getting killed. My brother got murdered, and it was just a lot going on. And I just really want to get out. And so a lot of stuff I never really shared. I internalized a lot of stuff. My mom, dad, sister, a lot of them didn't really know what was going on with me. But it was rough, man. It was really rough. And as I got older, I'm glad that I was able to look back and not have bitterness in my heart, because I was bitter for a long time against my parents, which trickled down to the other relationships that I had with my family. I know my older sister and I has always been like the closest in the family. And through the years, I found us just kind of having space between us, and, you know, us not being available for each other and talking to each other like we used to and things like that. But it was rough, man. It was rough. So let's switch gears a little bit. Did you go to school and get an education, or like how did you get out in so many words? So like we're going to use that term, get out.
Okay. So if we use get out,
Yeah.
we will have to use come back as well. So
Yes,
I tell you how I got out and tell
Yeah.
you about coming back.
Yeah.
So for me, I had this yearning desire to see something else, to see a different environment, to learn about new people. And I would say there were a couple of things. I went to DePaul in Chicago to study, to get my bachelor's, but there were a couple of other steps that led to that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first ones was I got accepted to it was like a travel program where I went to Seattle for a month. And it was like a photojournalism program where we traveled throughout the state of Washington and took a lot of pictures, interviewed a lot of people, and talked about just, you know, any questions that came to our mind. But while I was there, I gained a huge appreciation for nature. And it was a month of camping and a month of just interviewing people. So it was just like every day we're camping or kayaking and canoeing. And that was really important to me because I had never experienced anything, you know, of that magnitude, to just be camping for a full month in Washington. And and then when I got back home, you know, it was a city environment. It was you know, very, very I would say just uninspiring in a way, because, you know, some cities typically aren't like that. But that was in the community in which I grew up in Chicago. And so I went to Seton Hall in South Orange, New Jersey. That was the first school that I went to. And while I was in Seton Hall, I went to the John C. Whitehead School of Diplomacy. And I was so happy to get into the school. But what I hadn't realized is that I had owed money to university when it came to just paying in school. What I had misinterpreted on my financial aid letter, my award letter, was that I would be given a loan, but not that I would have to actually take it out and go through the process of getting it. So that's why I always say you can't fault people for things that they don't know, because I didn't know at the time. And the university said, well, you know, Mr. Alexander, we're going to have to ask you to leave, and you have 24 hours to do that. So I had to just go back home and spend a year, which was one of my more mentally challenging years, because it was a year of just trying to figure out, like, how do you structure your life? How do you just re-strategize from there? And I'm sure you remember, because we talked a lot during that time. And what I did is that I'm like, well, let me go to some place that's in a city that I know. And I got accepted into DePaul, and they gave me you know, some money to go there. And while I loved DePaul, it was it was really, really, really different for me because in the city that I've grown up in all my life, I had never visited Lincoln Park. And so it was completely new just
Mhm.
seeing where other people in Chicago grow up and where they live and
Yeah.
how positive and structured of an environment. And honestly, it just felt very safe. It felt very
Hmm.
safe and secure, which is something that uh, completely resonates with me when people say they feel unsafe in their environment. I take that very seriously because safety is always tied to mental health. Because if you don't feel safe in your environment, it unleashes a lot of uh, some issues that you may seem small that may seem small just uh, are now just these large issues. But so at DePaul, I felt very safe, and I love that. I love that, and I found myself then seeking out another environment when I studied abroad in Turkey for a year, and
Yeah.
that was also a very safe environment in a country that many people say is very unsafe. And I'm like, well, I feel very safe in the town that I'm in the school community that I'm in. And when I came back, I was then awarded a scholarship from the State Department to study Arabic in Morocco. And
Yes.
I found myself going to Morocco. Um, and that environment felt very safe.
Yes.
And so to me, when I think of my time at an undergraduate at DePaul, it was a very safe time and a very safe environment. In most instances, there was a couple of instances where I'm like, whoa, this is very different. But in a lot of instances at DePaul, and that it allowed me to travel and allowed me to see various different ways of life and how people how I internalize safety rather, because that was uh, that was important to me.
That's awesome. I'm curious to know, how did you adjust to other cultures and other races as you start to become more acclimated to travel and experience education at DePaul? How did you do with other cultures and races?
Well, I would say it was a lot, and even to this day, it still is like a lot of learning. But the thing about Turkey, because that was the first time like I had. It was the second time I had traveled out of the country, but it was the first time of me just getting up and just like, all right. I'll never forget my advisor. She had actually said, "Well, Cortez, you have the option of um, going to Turkey for one semester or for the entire year." And I
Wow.
said, let's go for the entire year because
Yeah,
let's
of
just see what
course.
happens. Let's just see what
Yeah.
happens. So I I found myself, and I remember I was working that summer for an organization called World Chicago, and um, and I remember distinctly because there was a person on the program. She was one of the facilitators, and I had trouble getting my Turkish visa because I'm like, how do I afford this? Because I'm not from a community with access and access to money because I'm a college student. I don't have I didn't have much money at all, and so little did I know that at the end of her at the end of that program, she would give me some a donation for my student visa for Turkey, and that was at the end of the summer. And then I got the student visa in time, and I was on the next flight to Turkey. And
Nice.
the thing that I'm really proud of myself about is just being able to just figure things out, but most importantly, just taking life by one day at a time and just seeing like what happens, because I never thought I'd just be in Turkey and just go from there. Now I didn't speak a lick of Turkish. I didn't know how to navigate it at all.
Yeah.
The country, nor how to get from the airport to my school, and so I had just a bit of money saved up, and I was like, okay, well, we have to take a taxi, and
Yeah.
I took a taxi from at this time it was called the Sabiha Gökçen Airport, and I took it all the way to there's a town called Sarıyer, And if there are any Turkish people who ever get to see us, they're gonna know like, okay, Sarıyer is a really far town in the northern part of Istanbul. So I went from basically the taxi ride was about 200 lira,
Mhm.
which at the time was about $100. Um, and I was like, okay, well, it took me about an hour to get there, but I made it there, and it started my journey of living in Turkey, and I loved it. I loved every second of it because while I
Nice.
was there, I I had met people from all over the world. I made friends from Germany and from France and from Belgium, and the world, what I thought was just so massive and so big, just
Yeah.
became very small,
Mm.
and I loved it. I did love it.
Nice, nice. Well, you also you touched on your getting your undergrad degree, but you also went to graduate school in London. Talk a little bit about that.
I did. So for me, I was very fortunate to have been working on exchange programs throughout my time at DePaul, and while I was a bit in high school, a bit in undergrad, and with World Chicago, they've always given me the opportunity to work with young people and work on exchange programs. And so while I was working on an exchange program, first I started out as a participant on one of their programs, and that's where I met a friend of mine. His name's Josh, and and so basically there was me from Chicago, a group of students from London, and a group of students from Baghdad, and we basically all kind of got together and hung out, and it was a program sponsored by for the Baghdad the students from Baghdad, well, the Iraqis, because it was more than just Baghdad. Students from Iraq and students
Mhm.
from the UK. Part of the program was sponsored by the U.S. Department of State, and the other part was sponsored by the former U.S. ambassador to the UK. And so basically, we just hung out with one another and got to know each other. So that friend I always kept in contact with, and he recommended that I studied that I go to this school called SOAS. And to me, I was like, well, Josh, I'm like, SOAS. I'm like, I don't know much about it. I've never, I've read about it, but I don't know if they'll admit me. But I had took a chance and applied, and they did accept me, and I found myself going to SOAS, which is part of the University of London, and I spent a year in London to get my master's, and it was also very safe, a
Yeah.
very safe environment. And the theme that I'm always going to keep running back to is safety and feeling safe, because that environment was really positive for me. So I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I know one of the things that your mom was worried about was safety. She was extremely concerned about that. And of course, you know, just being a brother, just kind of reassure her. I always took the stand, or I always took the position when me and her had conversations like, look, he's grown. I feel like he'll need to be in Chicago anyway, blah, blah, blah. I was kind of always going off my experience. So I always kind of reassured her regarding your safety and stuff. And then I think for me, I always wanted you to succeed, everybody in the family to succeed, not just you. But based off my experience, I felt like for myself, I needed to be out of Chicago because it was just too toxic. You know, folks getting killed at the time, just everywhere you go. When you came in the picture, you know, things was going on, but it wasn't as close to the family, in my opinion, as it was when we was growing up. Because you know, my brother's name was out there, you know, cousins was out there, like everybody was out there. And but when you came along and your siblings, you know, people kind of grew up a little bit. They, you know, they became an adult, and so they kind of slowed down just a little bit, just a smidge it, you know. And so for me, I'm like, okay, Virginia, he needs to be out of Chicago. He don't need to be here, blah blah blah. And her whole thing was, you know, I want him close. And I'm in her ear, like, well, Regina, I get that, but he's a man now, blah, 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 blah. And so one of the things I do want to highlight too, because we talked about your mother, my sister, but I do want to give her kudos and your dad because of the drug use and being out there, doing the things they did. They were able to bounce back. I'm talking about, to this day, I can still remember like the beginning stages of everything, and always been proud of my sister accomplishment. Was able to get off drugs, go to work, bought her first home, started a little business, like just all that. And I definitely appreciate her, and I always respected her for this because of the love and support that she had for her kids. I mean, amazing, amazing, because when my mom had her, she stayed with, like you, she stayed with her grandmother, which is my mom's mom. And so yeah, I think there was some things going on internally with her, because of, my mom had to let her stay with my grandmother for whatever reason. And so, but she bounced back. She bounced back. And I always was the type of person to brag on my family and you and my sister when I started doing things, and because it made me feel good, because at the time it seems like I was the one that was able to go to school, get a good job, make money, and just out. And I always wanted those that, from my family to do the same thing. And so I give my sister kudos and I give my brother-in-law kudos for just making it out of those particular situations and coming into their own and becoming great parents to you guys. Now they are a two-family home, married, got a house and business, and just really being there to support. We got you got a sister, my niece, she's in college now. Now you're able to provide support to her because you've been through it. You kind of know, like, the ropes, what really goes on. So you able to like, look, Malika, hey, you need to bring this back, or you need to kind of take this class. And it's good to have that support, man, because it's scary. I mean, for me, I don't know. I think my first year of college, my first semester, it was like, oh, I'm away from this crazy stuff. And I did feel safe, but someone took the wrong approach because I got kind of bugged. Wow. I started drinking and smoking weed and just doing all the things that I wasn't normally accustomed to doing for myself, on a habitual basis. And I think, and I never forget this, and I remember getting my grades and stuff, coming, going to Chicago on our break, winter break. And I remember, getting my grades. I was showing my mother, and I think I had a few D's or so. My mother was like, that's your life. And when she said that to me, nephew, that was the thing that clicked to me, because I'd already I considered being able to overcome challenges when it comes to studying and education. After that, oh, it was on, like A's. It was just because it took me back to my upbringing. And I felt like, okay, if I don't make it through here, I'm going to be stuck here. And that was the fuel for my fire. And I have been moving forth every since then. So I just kind of want to throw that in there. So let's talk a little bit about, because I want to touch on this a little bit. Have you ever experienced any racism while in school or during your travels or anything like that?
Well, I think for me, race and travel, like they're always intertwined because I travel and maneuver through the world as a Black man, which is very different than other people. And the countries I've traveled to, I've encountered race in a very different instance of it. When I did first get to Turkey, and I had to learn the metro system, mm-hmm. It was interesting because when I would ride the trains with my friends, it would be fine. But when I would ride it by myself, there would be people stopping me, wanting to take pictures. It's just inquiring and a sense of wonderment in a way. Like what are you doing here in this city? And when I would navigate through my town, I'll never forget this. There was one, just this shop owner. And I walked past his shop every single day. He would always wave at me and I wave at him. And every single day for about, after month 4, I think he just got comfortable enough with seeing me. So, all right, whoever this person is, I'm just gonna go. So he had invited me to his shop. And he didn't speak much English. It was not much English at all beyond hello. And then I guess a nephew of his came downstairs because he owned the shop on the first level and then he lived on the second level. Um, his nephew came down and and tried to explain that we want to invite you for dinner. And I
Yeah.
was like, I've okay, let's just go. Like my school is very close by, so if anything just goes wrong, I'll just go to run my school. Um, and so I went upstairs. I never forget. It was him and his daughter and his nephew, and we just sat and ate a meal with one another. We sat on the floor. We ate with our hands and just ate rice and a bit of stew, and it was really really good. And that moment for me was he just wanted to welcome me to Turkey, and
Yeah.
that's something I never forgot. While I was there, just in Turkey, there were some times that made me question, like, okay, was this a racial incident or not?
Yeah.
Like one time there was some kids just coming up to, like they were playing, and one of them saw me from across the street, and I looked at him. And he looked at me, and he couldn't believe it. He was like, "Oh my goodness!" That was the look he had on his face, like, "Oh my goodness, there's a black person here." And so all of him and his friends, about 6 or 7 kids, um, they all came around me and just started saying the N word, and I was like, "Huh." I would be really offended if this was, if I was home.
Yeah.
However, I have to take into context that this is a different country. The kids don't speak English, and this is the only word that they know to connect um, uh, me being black, and
Yeah.
wanted to welcome me because they were cheering me on and jumping up and down, excited to see me. But
Wow.
they were using that word, and I was like, I didn't know how to take it. So
Yeah.
I had reconciled with myself, like, Cortez, they're trying their best. Little do they know that it's offensive, but it
Yeah.
was it was something that I had to learn how to just let go and just forgive them for being unaware because
Yeah.
they were kids. Um, now, hopefully one day somebody could explain in Turkish that that was not okay, but I couldn't because my
Yeah.
Turkish wasn't as good. Um,
Yeah.
Other times,
So talk
um,
talk talk about
uh,
talk about the incident at DePaul.
okay, give me one second. I gotta
Okay.
reference you know this other time. When I was in Jordan, I had I was just walking along the street, and there was a police officer, and he he told me to just hurry along, idiot, in Arabic, and I explained to him, I'm like, well, I can understand what you're saying, so
Wow.
maybe not call me an idiot in Arabic because I know what what it means,
Wow.
but to reference the time at DePaul, that was an very interesting time. So I had a professor who had one of the hardest classes in my curriculum for what I studied, which was international studies, and he just made the class very hard. I'm like, why is this class so hard? And I'm like, I know a little bit of something, but the class just seemed impossible to pass. And
Yeah.
so for me, one day I didn't go to class because I'm just like I can't deal with this professor just this time.
Yeah.
Um, and when I got back to class the next day, my friend of mine, she had asked me, she said, "Well, Cortez, have you heard about what happened?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Well, she was like, "Well, the professor said that Oprah was ugly and she has a very large nose and she has really dark skin, so she's unattractive. And
Wow.
I was immediately offended because, it's like as Black people, we come in various shapes and sizes and various shades. And it's, to me, in my humble opinion, we're very beautiful people.
Yeah.
And I was very sad that he couldn't recognize that. And the fact that he chose to voice such a disgusting comment about Oprah, who has overcome various obstacles, I didn't find that acceptable. And so I had a conversation with another Black student um, in the program, and he was there, and he explained to me that's what was said, and to me, I felt hurt because I'm like,
Yeah.
this is racism at its core, even that I'm just hearing about it, and I'm like, it's coming through in the grading and the curriculum and the way he's working with our students of color. And so so I had to go to the department chair and explain to the department chair what had occurred. And I had to impress upon the department chair that I didn't want to be in that class again, nor for any of the Black students to be in the class, because I'm like, he obviously has this huge racial issue that is coming through when it comes to teaching us. And when we've asked to work with him and talk to him during his office hours, he just told us, well, we'll see you next year. We'll see you next
Wow.
year. And
Mm.
and when you explain to him, like, this is going to impact my graduation, which will then impact, uh, my family who wants to support me, because I wouldn't be able to graduate. And he didn't care. He didn't care at all. And I told him that. My friend told him that, and he said, I enjoy when students have to take my class. If I prevent their graduation, that's no problem.
That's
And
crazy.
so, oh yeah. And so for me, that was a very mentally challenging time because, I had worked for the entirety of 4 years to get to this point of graduation. And in my last, these last classes that I have to take, this is what's preventing me from graduating. And when I explained that to the department chair, I had proposed an independent study. I'm like, well, can the Black students do an independent study? Because it's obvious that he's racist. It's obvious that he's racist, and I would enjoy independent study more so than being in that environment with this teacher. And the department chair allowed it, and we were the Black students. We had got removed from the class, and we had to do our own independent study,
Good.
but we did
How how
pass.
how
So
how important is it? But let me back up. First of all, I think you did a phenomenal job with advocating not just for yourself, but the other Black or Blacks that was in that class, because clearly he was definitely going to be a barrier for you guys. There's just no question about that. How important is it for us as African Americans to advocate for ourselves to get our needs met?
well, I think it's extremely important. Extremely important, because if you don't advocate, how can people say, hey, we knew about this?
Yes.
And my thing is, the department chair could not say that he didn't know, because I had told him. Now, had
Yeah.
I not have spoken and not have told him, then he could have you know, just brushed it under the rug. Oh, nobody told me. It's not come to my doorstep, so I don't have to
Yeah.
deal with it. But I am
Yes.
telling him, yes, it's coming to your doorstep. I'm going to bring it to your doorstep, and I'm going to ask and hold you accountable for dealing with
Hmm.
this,
Good.
because the impact and the consequence is, not only do I not graduate, but the other Black students in the class won't graduate either. So
Hmm.
can we figure something out?
Yeah.
And we did. So I think advocacy is very, very important. And it, it's it both in the academic sense and in the professional sense. Because for me,
Hmm.
as I entered the professional world, it was a lot of advocating for myself. It was a lot
Hmm.
of just explaining to people like, hey, I finished school, I've gotten my master's, this is what I want. I just
Hmm.
want to start working. I want to get
Yeah.
some sort of experience under my belt beyond what I've had. I want to grow as a professional, and I want to grow as somebody who's seeking to learn about international exchange programs and education. This is what I'm passionate about. And as
Yeah.
I grow, I want to tell other people and explain it to other people and recruit other people.
Hmm.
So that's really where advocacy can take you. And
Yeah.
I think it's extremely important because as you advocate for yourself and other people, you make it just that much easier for
Yeah.
the next person behind you.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that it's not what you do, it's how you do it. It's a way to advocate too. Because had you went up in there and started to act irate and just, your character was not intact and, you were, using a lot of profanity, it would have been a different outcome. But because I think your approach was accepted by the department chair and you was able to communicate the facts very clearly. I think that he knew like, okay, this young man is on to something. This young man is coming to me because he's asking for some sort of a support and assistance regarding this matter. And so your approach, I really think, was important to get, your needs and the black or black students in that class needs met. So I think you did a good job with that situation right there. I want to touch on how did you get or what interests you to learn and to start speaking Arabic?
Um, that's an excellent question. When I was a participant on the Iraqi Young Leaders Exchange Program, it was a program sponsored by the U.S. Embassy, U.S. Department of State, the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. So basically, they create a program where they bring young students from Iraq to the United States for the summer, and it's a full summer program of them learning about public speaking, leadership development, and how to develop take action projects that you implement back home in your community. Um, for me, when I was in high school, I had simply read about the program, and I was like, okay, um, they're looking for students, and it's a free program. So they want the young Iraqi students to work with young Americans. And so it's a summer program for us to hang out with one another and get to know one another. Um, so I just applied and I had got it. And I went to Vermont, to Brattleboro, Vermont, at the School for International Training. And it was very different than Chicago. And all the Vermonters will definitely know, like, it's a very small community, but it's very green in Vermont. It's a really, really, really nice place. Um, and so didn't know much about what I was getting myself into, but
Yeah.
I did meet my roommates that night, and it was so fascinating to me to just meet people from London, meet people from Iraq, and my roommates they were from Baghdad, and I was like, so there were two from Baghdad, myself from Chicago, and one person from London, and we just sat up all night talking about our communities and where we're from, what Baghdad is like, uh, just looking at the currency and how different it is from the U.S. dollar. Um, I loved it, and I had a profound experience on that program. It had developed an interest in Arabic because all of my now Iraqi friends speak Arabic, and I had
Yeah.
wanted to communicate with them. So I decided to learn it and study it,
That's
and
awesome.
I enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, you definitely enjoy it,
Yeah.
which I think is good. So do you feel like what was it intimidating for you at first? Or did you feel like I don't know if I'm able to catch on, or you just kind of like, okay, this may be a challenge, I'm just gonna go ahead, just dive in deep first.
Yeah, well, for me, I would say, and for anybody who study Arabic, they would know learning Arabic is just a lifelong process.
Yeah.
Whereas other languages like with French or Spanish, it's a bit more easier to understand because it's a Latin-based script. Arabic is completely different. It looks nothing like English.
Hmm.
It and it has its own letters, and you write from right to left. So as I was learning, I had to. I didn't. I put a lot of pressure on myself, and that created a lot of anxiety when it came to me studying the language. But I had one professor. She explained to me like, Cortez, you put a lot of pressure on yourself. All I want you to do is to learn the alphabet. That's
Mm.
it. That's the only thing I want you to know. And so I just focused on the alphabet and learning the alphabet. And and to this day, I thank her because I still remember her telling me like just learn the alphabet um, because that's the building block of studying Arabic.
Yeah.
And so what at a certain point just felt like squiggly lines became just letters that I recognized, that became words that I understood, which became sentences that I could, you know, recite and understand and interpret myself. And the funny thing is like um, when I write in Arabic, my brain just automatically switches and it knows that okay, we're writing from right to left. This is what we want to
Nice.
say. This is how we want to express it. Um, and that's how it works. So it's interesting just how languages form and how accustomed you get to just write in different ways.
Yeah. Do you feel like it has benefited your career, impacted your career
Oh,
in a, positive way?
absolutely, absolutely. I love Arabic. In the Middle East, just itself is this beautiful
Yeah.
region. Um, Honestly, I only ever get jobs because I can speak Arabic or I've been to the Middle East and I understand, the culture.
Yeah.
Um, because the same program I was a participant on, that is the program that I now work on. So it kind of came full circle for me when it comes to uh, just uh, loving the language, but also working on a program that I'm passionate about and that I know very very well. Uh, so yeah, it's
Nice.
definitely benefited me.
Nice. And I know at one point you talked about teaching the Arabic language to underprivileged kids as well, or
Mhm.
youth.
That's still a passion of mine
Yeah.
because Arabic has you know opened so many doors for me.
Yeah.
I always want to advocate that other people learn it. So when I meet people, and particularly young people, I try to speak in a way to kind of demystify Arabic and to
Yeah.
make it a little bit, understandable to them. And so when they encounter the language, they're able to, not be so intimidated by it because when you don't understand something, it can be very intimidating. So I try to make it a bit more easier to understand and also less, try to demystify it. And I say that because I I've I was at DePaul and I was part of this group called the Arabic Culture Club, and they had a program at an outreach program at the Lynn Bloom Math and Science Academy, which is a school on the south side of Chicago. And so I went there and I was really, really shocked by the interest in Arabic. But I was really happy because I'm like, here are people who are from a very similar community to me, but they're very passionate and they're educated about learning Arabic. So I was happy to just engage with them and interact with them. So that's something that I absolutely love to advocate for.
Awesome. I really hope you get a chance to pursue that and it comes to pass. But we have run out of time. I told you it's going to go quick.
What?
Um,
Oh man.
I know. Well,
I could talk about this all day, Uncle Jess.
I know. I know. Oh, you'll get a chance to come back. Trust me. But before we go, I do want to say this. I am extremely, extremely proud of you, man. Like, you have no idea how much I brag on you, you know, especially when it comes to your accomplishment and comes to you speaking the Arabic language. You know, I'm so grateful to be one that, you know, has been able to speak into your life, want to be able to have had experience you as a family member and be part of what God has got for you. You're going to do, trust me and believe, you're going to do far more greater things than you doing now. You know, you well traveled, you well spoken, you know, you're doing your thing, just bought your first house. So things is only going to look up from here. I want to encourage you to stay on your path. Don't let nothing and no one distract you, because you're going to do great things in this life. So keep
Thank
it
you
up,
very
nephew. I
much.
love you for sure.
Thank you very much, Uncle Jesse. I love you too.
All right.
I can't top that. So thank you
Yeah.
very much.
All right. And
All
that's
right.
it for today's edition of Mental Health Matters. If you enjoyed this particular show, if you would like a DVD copy of this show, or if you would like to be a guest on our show, please dial 916-366-4600. Thank you.